All right, good evening, everyone. I have 7 o'clock, so let's get started. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual event with special guest Casey J. Cornelius, a two-time University of Toledo graduate who now serves as the founder and president of ForCollegeForLife. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Greek Fraternity and Sorority alumni affiliate of the UToledo Alumni Association. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Smith. I'm a Director of Alumni Engagement for the University of Toledo Office of Alumni Engagement and one of your hosts for tonight's program. As guests are joining, I would like to share a few housekeeping notes about tonight's virtual event. Attendee names are not visible to most other attendees, so I know for some of you, depending on what device and what platform you're using, it may look like you're the only one here. Trust me. Rest assured, we have a nice crowd of attendees who are gathered here tonight for this presentation. Additionally, if you'd like to change the view of your screen, feel free to do that, and that way you can see the presentation more clearly or the speaker more clearly. Just know you're allowed to do that as well. If you have questions, and we do encourage you to ask questions, feel free to use the chat function. Me and Mark will be watching that during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session at the end that we can ask Casey those questions as well. The Q&A is there. That's more just if you need my attention for something and you have a question for that. That's what the Q&A function is there for. Now I'd like to officially welcome Mark Uridia, president of the UToledo Greek Alumni Affiliate, who is going to introduce Casey Cornelius.
Thanks so much, Paul, and welcome to everyone. Of course, when I clicked unmute, my script went away, so now I got to bring it back here. I'll do it this way. Casey Cornelius, for those of you who don't know him, is a national voice on topics of personal development and healthy masculinity. A proud fraternity man and member of his chapter's Hall of Fame, Casey travels the country both physically and virtually now, helping organizations and individuals be extraordinary. He serves as a Speaks-Mo, now that's their words, not mine, or his, for the Movember Foundation, which recognizes him for his work to promote men's health and healthy being. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio, he holds a bachelor's degree from UToledo's University College in 2001 and 2 master's degrees, one of them from UToledo Arts and Sciences in 2003, and a 4.0 in his doctorate studies, despite being advised that college just wasn't for everyone. He resides in Michigan with his wife, who's a College of Education graduate in 2001, and his daughter, who in his spare time dedicates a practitioner of the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's something that I do not have. An endurance athlete and aspiring ultra marathoner. Again, something that I don't participate in. His goal in 2021 is to complete his first 50K race. Now, I have to say I've done a 5K walk for the ability experience, raising a little bit of money. For those of you who also don't know, Casey and I share a fraternity together, Pi Kappa Phi, and I remember Casey when he first came to the University of Toledo, or at least first got involved with the fraternity. Is much different than he is now, I will admit. The one thing that we do share in common, besides our fraternity, We both were the recruitment chair, as we call Vice Archon or Vice President of our fraternity. And so I have a lot of great stories, but unfortunately, I'm not able to share them with you at this time.
Man.
So I'll just leave the time to Casey to go through his presentation. Welcome. Thanks so much for sharing, Casey.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Paul. I got to tell you, I've been introduced by a lot of people. No one with as many stories of me as Mark. So my heart was beating a little fast there for just a second. So thank you for the introduction, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who joined tonight. I really appreciate you being here. I know that there's a lot of things you could be doing with your time, especially those of you who are undergrads. I mean, you know, when this program was conceived, I think we probably envisioned a lot of older folks like us coming together, maybe hearing some stories and so forth. But I was really surprised at the level of undergraduate interest in this program as well. So I hope you get some value from this. You see my contact information on the screen. You also see a QR code in the bottom right of this screen. If you have your cell phone with you, if you're not tuning in on your cell phone, all you have to do is hold it up to that QR code. It gives you all of my contact information. I encourage you to connect with me on the platform of your choice. It also has my email address and my phone. Yeah, I even included my phone number. A lot of trust going out. Pop me a text, give me a call if you want. Just don't do it right now because, you know, a little busy. So I hope you get some good value out of this. I want to share some stuff tonight that is different than most of the programs that I ever get to do. See, I am a professional speaker. I get to work with colleges and universities all across the country, big schools, small schools, public, private, religiously affiliated or not, all the geography, right? And everywhere in between. But there's something special about coming home to the University of Toledo. It really, really does my heart well. And again, when this program was conceived, I sure was excited to be able to join you. This year has been a little wild. I think we can all attest to that. And I want to start by admitting how wild it has been, right? So, most of the time when we do an engagement like this, I get to come there in person. I get to someone hands me a microphone and we get to have this type of dialogue. This is different. I get it. It's different. But I hope again that you get something out of it. Please use the Q&A function. I've promised that I'll answer 99% of questions that you ask. The only ones that are off limits are, I guess, like my bank account information or anything like that. But otherwise, I'm going to do my best to answer as many at the end of this program as possible. So please use it if anything is of interest to you, or if I didn't talk about anything that maybe you hoped I would. So, in what I do in professional speaking, and not only in my role as a speaker, but also owning a speaking agency, I often tell people there are 3 paths to speaking success, right? The first one is teaching an audience something, right? Consolidating some information, some topic that you have more time or expertise on, and condensing it into a format in which an audience can get something out of it, can get some new knowledge or a new perspective they had not yet considered. The second flow to this can be that you're trying to inspire action in some way, right? You have a group of people who are listening to your voice and you're trying to move them from where they are to where you hope they can be. That's the second format, and that one's a little bit harder. Tonight does not lend itself to either of those formats for this program. Instead, I'm going to go the third path, and probably the scariest path for most people who do what I do, and that is storytelling. Tonight, I'm going to tell some stories about my experience at the University of Toledo that are deeply meaningful to me. And I can't promise you, in fact, I know for certain that they're not going to be as deeply meaningful to you. But as I reflected on my time and experience at UT, I knew that these were the touch points. These were the chronology of things that truly shaped who I am today. So I hope you enjoy the stories. There were about 15,000 stories that I could share. These are only the ones that just made the cut. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge one other thing. This last year has been pretty wild. From a psychological standpoint, this is a pretty standard understanding of the cycle of grief, right? So it kind of goes through a U-shape. We go from where we are to some traumatic experience and go through the stages of grief and come out on the other side in a more positive format. And I don't know about you, but that has not necessarily been my experience for the last 12 or 13 months. Instead, my experiences look something more like this, where every day seems to create a new stress, a new anxiety, a new challenge that we have to overcome. And I'm so glad to say that, we are overcoming them in big ways and small ways. All of us have dealt with challenges this last year. And I hope, I know I have, and my guess is you probably have as well. I hope that you haven't dealt with a tremendous amount of loss, because I know that that's something that we can never get back. As much as we can get back to normal, we can never overcome those losses that we've experienced. But we're here, and it's time for us to do extraordinary things together. Now, with that said, I'm going to tell you one last story. As I prepared for this program today, I was really, really excited. I often bring high energy. I don't know if you can tell, but I bring a lot of high energy to things. Today, I'm batting at about 70% because at 8:41 this morning, I got an email that said, urgent, we have excess Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Would you like one? Click this to register. And I immediately did. And I got an appointment a little over an hour and a half later. So I am, let's see what now, about 8-9 hours into my first vaccination. And I will tell you, I encourage everyone to get their vaccination. However, I do not encourage anyone to get their vaccination the day they have to do a speaking engagement. It's been a little rough. So if I'm not quite 100%, I hope you accept my apology. My story begins here. As Mark mentioned, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up, for those of you who are familiar with Cincinnati, I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati in Price Hill. This is the house I grew up in. To say that we grew up in a working class neighborhood, I think would be polite. Probably more likely to say working poor. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm a proud first-gen student. And both my parents worked for the city of Cincinnati their entire career. In fact, my mom had to take off of work in order to graduate from high school, which is kind of an amazing story. As I look back on it, though, I will tell you that I was surrounded in my family by a lot of good people. My neighborhood, a little less, but my family, a lot of good people, but most of them never saw college going as the goal. In fact, as I reflect on it, most never graduated from high school. So while I'm proud to be the first person in my family to go to college, I have to also acknowledge the fact that it was not necessarily the expectation. I can't say it wasn't my parents' hope. Of course, it was their hope for me, but it wasn't necessarily the expectation statistically that I would get there. So in my K-12 experience, I will confess to you that I did not necessarily take education all that seriously. And my high school counselor did sit me down my senior year and had a talk with me that still rings in my ear to this day. And in that talk, she said to me, Mrs. Hacker was her name, Mrs. Hacker said, Casey, college isn't for everyone. Now, what she knew that you don't yet know is that I was going to graduate from high school with a 2.1 GPA, 2.1 GPA. By the way, I look like this as a graduate of high school, just to give some reference. And before you make the hair joke, it was good hair. It was pre-Dawson's Creek. The hair was really good at that. And, I'm willing to endure a little bit of embarrassment by putting this up. And I know this video is going out to the world after this is over. That's okay. That's okay. That was your boy, his senior year of high school. So when my high school counselor sat me down and said, college isn't for everyone, I proceeded to take it as a challenge to my ego. And I said, you know what? I'm going to show you. And I proceeded to apply to as many colleges as I could think of. Whether I liked the school, whether I'd ever stepped foot on the school, whether I just liked the college football team that they had. I decided that I was going to prove her wrong and take my 2.1 GPA out on the road and see who was going to accept me into their institution of higher learning. And with each and every application, I was met with this small envelope in return. I hope you've never experienced the small envelope moment, but if you have, caution, this is going to bring back some bad memories. They often go something like this. Thank you so much for your application. After careful review of your materials, and it wasn't often all that careful, don't call us, we'll call you. And the careful review of my materials was often just the GPA. Like once you hit a 2.1 GPA, there's not a lot to talk about, I suppose, right? Like knowing what I know now. So each of my applications was met with that exact same response. I also got a small envelope from the University of Toledo. And in that letter, Jerry Carter was his name. It was January 27th, 1997. This was part of the letter that he sent to me. So it started very much the same way as all the other letters. Small envelope. Thank you so much for your application. Careful review of your materials. Whoa, you're not ready. But at the end of the letter that's still framed in my office, it said, if you would like to discuss this decision, call this number. And I did. And I had about a half hour, 45-minute conversation with Jerry. And during the course of that conversation, I guess I said enough things that he decided to give me a 1-semester probation, a 1-semester opportunity to prove that I was college material. And I'm so glad that he did. But I will tell you, I reflect on January 27th, 1997, because it was when my ego was absolutely at the lowest. Being initially rejected by the University of Toledo until that phone call meant that every single college I applied to said no. But then he was my lifeline, gave me that 1 semester to prove that I belonged. So I arrived at the University of Toledo my first year to meet my roommate. My roommate was his high school's valedictorian. And I was immediately stressed, impressed. I meant impressed. I was really impressed and then stressed to realize the fact that I was in different water now. So we're making small talk. And he said to me, we were talking about majors. And he said to me that his major was something like biomechanical engineering. And I was like, holy moly. And his mom, noticing the fact that I didn't seem to have a quick answer, said to me, so what's your major? And I said, communication. Not because it was actually my major, but simply because it was something that sounded interesting to me. And I knew at that moment that I needed to step up my game. And I knew I needed to dedicate myself to my studies because my roommate, the valedictorian, was here for a completely different purpose. He knew he was going to be successful. I hoped I was going to be. By the way, one of the other things that he let slip, and I always reflect on this as well, is his high school GPA was 4.2. Mine was 2.1, his was 4.2, and I'm not great at math, but I instantly felt like the kid in gym class who got lapped on the track. Like he did it twice in the same amount of time it took me to do it once. So there I was in Parks Tower, my first residence at the University of Toledo, 3rd floor Parks Tower, realizing the fact that I needed to change my practices. I needed to change my behaviors. I needed to truly buckle down and be the best student I could, because I didn't know if that 1 semester probation meant that I could come back the next semester. I remember walking to Centennial Mall, and the night kind of looked like this. Obviously, this picture is not from that night, but it kind of looked like this. And I remember standing there looking up at the bell tower and asking myself this question: how did I get here? How did I get here? And the second question, probably not as artfully worded, was, what am I going to do now? How do I get from here to what's beyond? How do I get from here to where I want to be? And it was in that first year that my life changed in a very significant way. See, what I haven't told you yet is one of the reasons that I desperately wanted to come to the University of Toledo is that my then girlfriend, now wife, who had been accepted to all of the colleges that rejected me, was also accepted to the University of Toledo. And she was hoping that I would get accepted too, so that we could continue this teenage romance that was so important in our life. And we did. I remember when her family dropped her off at college, and her father and mother, knowing me a little bit as they did, wished their daughter well. And her father turned to me and said, please take care of my little girl. And I shook his hand and I promised him that I would. What I didn't know was that 6 weeks later, 6 weeks after they left the University of Toledo, my then girlfriend, now wife, her father would be killed in a workplace accident. I remember when the nuns from Corpus Christi came to let her know of her father's passing. I remember traveling home with her about 3 hours to the Canton-Akron area, New Philadelphia, for those of you who are familiar, holding her hand the entire way. I remember that feeling of being 18 years old and experiencing loss truly for the first time, and knowing that I needed to be there for her and also keep my promise to her father to take care of her. That was one of my most memorable experiences in my first year at the University of Toledo. So as we came back, we created a small unit, a small circle of friends that really tried to help her get through that experience as best as you can, as best as some first-year students can, the loss of a parent, and really focused on being successful academically. But my life was about to change in another dramatic way. See, it was in my first year that I was offered my first job ever on a college campus. My first job ever on a college campus was as a resident advisor. I was a resident advisor at the academic house, right? Which, if you remember me graduating with a 2.1 GPA, is ironic on so many levels, because I was going to get to help to shape the young, impressionable minds of first-year students who were doing laps around me in high school. But I had solidified myself to the point where I felt comfortable doing it. I believe wholeheartedly that being a resident advisor is the hardest job on any college campus. I've argued that point to college presidents all across the country. I believe it to be true, because when you have a bad day, you don't get to go home. You're already there. So when I was in academic house, I was preparing for my first training to be a resident advisor. And I was going through the standard, imposter syndrome that you have walking into a meeting where you're thinking to yourself, are they going to find out that I have no idea what it means to be a resident advisor? See, the only thing that they told me was that I could live on campus for free and that they would pay for my meal plan. And since I had really enjoyed the freshman 15, I was good to go a second year. I was good to go another lap around that track as well. But when I walked in with this imposter syndrome ringing in my ears, the first thing I noticed was a group of guys who seemed just a little closer than the others, who seemed a little more friendly than everybody else, who seemed a little cooler with one another. And what I came to find out, and what probably doesn't surprise you, is that they were all fraternity members. In fact, they were all members of the same chapter. In my first year, I kind of resisted joining Greek life. I'd kind of resisted the idea of fraternity, primarily because I didn't know very much about it, only the things that I saw on TV and movies and heard rumors about, all that other kind of stuff. But secondly, because I was convinced that I couldn't be successful as a student because of fraternity. So when those guys that I recognized as being tighter than everyone else, cooler than everyone else, better leaders than everyone else said, hey, would you like to come to a recruitment event? My answer was immediately yes. And then eventually when they said, hey, would you like to accept an invitation to join our fraternity? My answer was also yes. And I will tell you that that decision forever changed my life for the better. As Mark mentioned, we share the letters Pi Kappa Phi. For those of you who are hearing my voice either live or in the future, maybe we don't share the same letters. That's okay. At the time, I thought that was a big deal. Like, we could only be friends if we shared the same letters. What I've come to find in my life and through all the iterations of fraternity, and by the way, I mean fraternity in terms of fraternity and sorority, is that we share a bond that's truly special. And I've lost track of the ways that my life have been bettered because of fraternity. I know that I'm a better husband. I know that I'm a better father. I know that I'm a better son. I know that I'm a better friend. I know that I'm a better business owner. I think I'm a better neighbor and citizen because of fraternity. Fraternity is where I met some of the most influential people in my life here at the University of Toledo, and because of fraternity all across the country. And I want to tell you a story about one of the most impactful people I ever met as well. His name was Joe Faley. As Mark mentioned, I was a recruitment chair, vice president, vice archon, and Pi Cap speak when I was in the chapter. And one of the first people that I brought into the chapter's name was Joe Faley. And we became really good friends. He was a year younger than me, but maybe two years younger than me. We became really good friends. I saw something in him. There was a spark in him. He was funny. He was clever. He was smart. There was something about him that just sort of drew me in and drew a lot of people in as well. And I felt really fortunate that he became part of our brotherhood. And we started taking classes together. For some reason, we found ourselves in some of the same classes, and we would go to lunch together, and we really developed a really great friendship. His is one of the most indelible friendships that I remember of my time at the University of Toledo. I'll come back to him in just a second. But because of fraternity, because of my experience, I also got to meet some incredible people in my organization and in your organizations. People who've led for years and years and decades and decades. I got to meet and become best friends with the person who wrote the new member education manual for Pi Kappa Phi. I just knew the name TJ Sullivan for a quiz question one time. And now he's one of my closest friends in this world because of fraternity, because of the University of Toledo, because I'm a rocket. Now, this is the only picture of the old sociology anthropology building that's left. For that, I apologize. I did my best research. I reached out to the Candidate Center. I tried to get a better picture. This is not from when I was at the University of Toledo. I promise you, this looks like it was 1965-ish. I'm not sure. But there used to be sort of a trailer that was intended to be for short-term use, and it housed the Departments of Sociology and Anthropology. And I took a lot of classes in this building. In my senior year, when I was preparing for law school, see, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I thought being a lawyer sounded good. My mom seemed really happy about it. So I was applying to all these law schools and I was getting accepted. And I had taken a lot of sociology classes. And I confessed to one of my professors at the time that I didn't really know if I wanted to go to law school or not. So he sat me down. Oh, by the way, I wanted to do this real quick. This was a map of the University of Toledo at the time. The Sociology Anthropology building is next to the library. If you see the word Ottawa for Ottawa River and kind of look above it, that's where it was. It's not there anymore. But we sat down in this building and he said to me, you know, you could come to grad school. You could come to grad school here in the Department of Sociology. And I was like, great, sounds good. Didn't think anything of it. And he goes, do you understand what I'm saying? And I didn't. Remember, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And certainly nobody in my family ever thought about grad school. And he said, we'll pay for you to get your master's degree. I was like, oh, well, that sounds good. He goes, and we'll pay you. We'll pay you to teach. I was like, great. So I signed up, did my application for the grad school, was admitted to the master's program in the Department of Sociology. Now, for someone who barely graduated from high school, going to grad school was like being on another planet. I didn't exactly know how to fit in. Again, that imposter syndrome sank in, right? When I was coming to class, it was different than being an undergrad. Now I was one of the small group of people who are actually entrusted to be grad students of the program. And I was assigned to a professor to work for. His name was Leslie Wong. And what I knew about Leslie was that he loved teaching. Right? He loved teaching, didn't really care as much about research. He's no longer at the university, so I'm not ratting him out there. He didn't care as much about research, but really, really loved teaching. So when we sat down and started getting to know each other, he asked me, Casey, what do you want to do with your degree? And because I'm no fool, I said, I would love to teach. Because I knew if I loved what he loved, he was going to invest in me. But he said something to me that I didn't expect. He said to me, okay, you're going to teach your first class next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Next Wednesday, 8 a.m. And being a first-year grad student in my first semester, I was like, I got this, no problem. 200 people in the room, I got it. It just so happens that next Wednesday at 8 a.m. was September 12th, 2001. The first time I ever spoke in front of a college audience in a meaningful way was teaching on the morning of September 12th. For those of you who were young then or not yet born, that date is just a date, right? It's the day after 9/11. For those of us who are old enough to remember that date, it was incredibly scary. There was a lot of anxiety in the air. There was a lot of tension. And I knew that I had to overcome my personal fears and the fear of being in front of the audience that day in order to be successful. And I remember teaching the class, and I remember Leslie coming up to me at the end and he said, well, if you got through today, they'll all be pretty easy. And he was right. That was really the launch of my career. I didn't know until that moment that I truly wanted to teach for the rest of my life. Now, I taught in a professional way after my time at the University of Toledo. I became a faculty member. And then I eventually became a college administrator, and now I teach in a completely different way. I get to teach audiences all across the country, which is really cool, even in this last year where I have to teach like this. But it all comes back to that moment, the old sociology anthropology building that isn't even there. When someone said to me, what about grad school? We'll pay for it. And we'll pay you to do it. And someone said to me, what do you want to do with this degree? And I said, I want to teach. And then someone said to me, next Wednesday at 8 a.m. And then someone said to me, you're still on. And finally, if you get through this one, they'll all be pretty easy. See, one of the things that I've learned from my time at the University of Toledo is a series of lessons that I can apply to leadership. And I can apply to all of the things that have come afterwards, especially this last year. As I think about all of the things I've had to do in this last year in order to be successful in my career, in order to be successful leading an organization, the roots of these things are found in my time at the University of Toledo. The first one is to be grateful. I understood from the very moment, the first letter I ever opened from the University of Toledo, that I should be grateful for the opportunities that I was given. I was grateful that the letter ended differently than the dozen or so that preceded it from all the other schools that just said no. The University of Toledo said, maybe not right now, but we would like to talk to you. We would like to have a conversation. And if I had allowed my ego, my 17, 18-year-old ego to take over at that point, I never would have had the opportunity to even find out. I never would have had the opportunity to find out what was on the other side of feeling so small. I would never have the gratitude that I can express right now for UT, for the opportunities that I've been given because I'm a rocket. The second major lesson is that you have to honor your priorities. Whatever your priorities are, whatever you say you've committed yourself to, you have to honor them in a meaningful way. When my wife's father died our first semester in college, the first 6 weeks in college, I knew that I had a commitment, a priority that I had to honor. I shook his hand and told him that I was going to be there to protect his daughter. I knew when I was granted my first chance to work on a college campus that I needed to prioritize that experience. I needed to prioritize getting past the feeling of being an imposter. I needed to prioritize getting to know those people that I thought were the coolest people in the world. And then eventually I needed to prioritize this thing called fraternity. I kick myself sometimes that I didn't join my first year of college because I felt like I missed out on a year. But then at the same time, I think to myself, if not for the dedication I put into my first year academically, taking good care of my now wife, I don't know that I would have been the same person. I don't know that I was yet ready. I think that the stars align when they align. But what it meant was when I got to the chapter, I also came into leadership positions very, very quickly. That was a priority to me as well. It was a priority to me to be the best member I could be. Don't get me wrong, I made mistakes, right? Everybody makes mistakes when they're 18 to 22. One of the stories that I like to tell is that of bamboo, right? You plant bamboo in the soil, you water it every single day, and it takes a long time to grow. By the time it does, it's one of the fastest growing plants in the world. It can grow 90 feet, 4 feet in a day, all this other kind of stuff. We are very much like bamboo in this way. I didn't know how fraternity was going to sprout for me. I didn't know what type of tree, what type of wood that would produce, but it did because I prioritized it. Taking chances. I didn't have to be a resident advisor. I could have given in to the trepidation. I could have given in to the notion that I wasn't really ready for it. I could have failed to take the chances to make friends. I could have failed to take the chances to pursue my academic interests. I could have failed to take the chances to say, yes, I'll apply to grad school or even sit down and have that conversation with a professor who had my best interests at heart. I could have failed to do those things, but by taking those chances, it opens so many opportunities. See, I believe that we're constantly bombarded with choices. All of us in our world, we're subject to these things that we're able to go left or go right, go 1, 2, or 3. We're presented with choices each and every day, and those choices reflect our priorities. So, for example, choosing to pay your cell phone bill means that you're prioritizing the ability to be in contact with other people. If you don't do it, for example, you're choosing that that's not a priority. Taking those chances was saying that I was prioritizing these things in my world. I was prioritizing the ability to have these experiences. I was prioritizing the ability to give back, but only because I could take those chances. Being part of something greater than myself. I don't use the word larger, not just being part of something larger than myself. I wanted to surround myself with people who challenged me to be the best version of myself possible. I knew that I was getting better because a fraternity. I knew that I was getting better because of the people that I surrounded myself with in the chapter and across the community, fraternity, sorority. I knew that I was better because of student government. I knew that it was better because of the organizations that I was in. I knew that I was better because I was surrounding myself with better. See, this year has been one of those ones where it's been easy to isolate ourselves. And I know that there's been some of that by necessity, where we've had to lock down, we've had to distance ourselves. But the idea of being part of something greater than ourselves means that we always know that there's community. We always know that there's people for us. And I always knew that there was community for me. I always knew that I was part of something greater than myself. The next thing is honoring your people. I mentioned before honoring priorities. Honoring your people is a completely different life lesson that I took from the University of Toledo. Once you decide that your people, like the 5 people or the 10 people, whatever it is, that are closest to you, that you've let them in some meaningful way, it means that you have to demonstrate that honor through being there for them in good times and bad times and in tough times. I talked to you about one of my closest friends at UT. His name was Joe Faley. And what I didn't tell you was Joe was diagnosed with cancer while we were students. And it was aggressive and it was fast. And for several days, I was in the hospital with Joe. I slept on the floor because I didn't want him to be alone. And I was there for him in the subsequent months when he had chemotherapy. And I was there with him when he had some of his ribs removed. And he was there for me. He was there for me to bring light to situations, to help me laugh. If anybody, who's hearing my voice knew Joe, they knew that he was really good at that. And the day that I graduated, Joe was there as well. He was the only non-family member who came to my graduation. And he came to my graduation at a time where it was hard for him to walk. If you've ever walked up the hill at Savage Hall, where graduation commencement was held, he struggled. He struggled walking up that hill, and he struggled walking up the bleachers in order to find a seat, but he was there. He was there for me because of our friendship, because of our bond, and because of our love. During grad school, Joe's condition continued to deteriorate. And eventually, this is hard. I don't talk about this all that often. Eventually, Joe was nearing the end. And I remember being profoundly sad not only that I was losing my friend and my chapter brother, but someone that I really looked at as my little brother too. And eventually he passed. And there's not a year that passes that I don't think of that day. And there's not a time that I don't shave my head that I don't remember the first time I did it, which was in solidarity for him while he had chemo. I knew that during that time he was embracing fear too. He was embracing fear to try to go to his classes. I was embracing different fears of like teaching a class on hard days and those other challenges that just scare us on an inward level that we don't exactly know how to express to others. We all feel those things, whether it's the paper that you need to write for the end of the semester, or whether it's the speech you need to give in order to finish a class, or whether it's that big exam in bio that if you don't pass it, you're gonna have to take this class again next semester. We embrace these fears and we get stronger because of them. And that's been one of the leadership lessons that I've really taken with me this last year as well. This has been one of those years that I've embraced fear in ways that I could have never imagined, but I could not have done it if not for learning how to do it at the University of Toledo. I often share this story, especially recently as it relates to this work that I do as a professional speaker. A year ago, March 10th, I came home from my last in-person engagement. I was at Southeast Missouri State, and I came home and I knew that there was this virus that was happening. And what I didn't know is that was the last flight that I would take. March 10th, my 30th flight of 2020 was the last flight I took. And up until that point, I had never done this. I had never done a virtual program. My company, who's, we do a lot of good stuff. We've never done this. And now it's 99.8% of what we do because We embrace the fear. We embrace the fear of changing. We embrace the fear of the unknown. If we hadn't, wouldn't be here today. Certainly not in the professional capacity. We have to be bold. And I'm going to tell you one last story about my good brother, Joe Faley. After he passed, I took it as a commitment that I wanted to do something special for him. And I wanted to make sure that he was posthumously granted his degree from the University of Toledo. So I made an appointment in the last several weeks of my time in 2003, right before my own graduation from my master's program, with the provost of the university. Dr. Bischoff was his name. And I sat with Dr. Bischoff and I pled my case that I believed that my friend should be granted a posthumous degree. And I did it with an impassioned plea. I told him stories about Joe and how important he was to so many people around him and how his professors loved him and all this other kind of stuff. And he looked at me and said, no, we're not going to grant him a degree. And I said to him, Dr. Bischoff, if you do this university that I love, I'm done. I will never come back. I'll get my degree and I'll move on, but I'll never come back. And I remember he looked at me and he said, it means that much to you? I said, it means that much to me. And several weeks later, as I graduated from the second time from the University of Toledo, Joe graduated as well. And his family was there to receive this degree. And while my parents were crying for me, I was crying for him. But I was bold. I was bold in that moment to say to the provost, first of all, why was he even having a meeting with me to begin with? But to say to the provost, no, you need to reconsider this. And he did. What are your opportunities to be bold? What are the ways in which you can advocate for the things that mean something in your life? Whether if you're an undergrad, whether here at the university, whether in your career, whether in your family, whether in your relationships, whether in your community, how can you be bold enough to really show the people what you care about? The last thing that I take from my time at the University of Toledo is that we need to give what and when we can. Give what and when we can. If you think about this from a leadership perspective, we often call this servant leadership. When I was a student, I gave my time. I gave whatever talents I had. I gave whatever energy I had to the university. As a grad student, I gave whatever talents and time and energy I had. As a young alum, I gave very little because I had very little to give. As I get invited to come back and speak to fraternity and sorority life, as I come back and speak with the chapter, as I get to mentor young members of our organizations, that is what I've been given the opportunity to do. This is how I give back. And the other way that I give back is every single time someone hands me a microphone or turns on a camera and I get to tell a little bit of my story, I talk about the University of Toledo. And I talk about, if not for the university, I don't know where I would be. But I know I wouldn't be here. I'm here because of the University of Toledo. And I'm here because I'm a rocket. Thank you for coming tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I know that we're going to have some opportunity for Q&A. I think I landed, Paul, I think I landed the plane at exactly the time that you told me to. And I look forward to answering as many questions as I can.
Thank you, Casey. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. We also appreciate your passion for the University of Toledo, your passion for student affairs, your passion for helping others, and leaving the world, a better place for people who have had a chance to interact with you. A few questions have come in, so I'm going to start with those. If you have questions, please, throughout this time, shoot them in chat, shoot them in Q&A. We'll be happy to address them. So the first question that has come in, and it goes, for seniors that are ready to graduate, that first year is often a difficult time, even though many times Greek students seem to be more aptly equipped to handle it. But what advice do you have for navigating that first year out of college, sort of out on your own, as people look to graduate and head off into this sort of post-pandemic world, if you will, or end of the pandemic world? What advice do you have?
Yeah, specifically for my sorority and fraternity friends, one of the things that I often say is, we have agreed to a lifelong commitment to one another. We have agreed to lifelong sisterhood or lifelong brotherhood. I don't think that there's anything I ever read or that anyone ever taught me that said, when you move that tassel from here to here, your membership is done. So one of the things that I always like to advocate for is getting rid of this idea of past tense membership. I was a sorority woman, or I was a fraternity man. I'm like, whoa, what happened? Aren't you still? So in your first year, understand you're going through a major change in your life, a major reshuffling of the deck. But you have this thing. You have this ability to be connected to others, whether you share the same chapter or the same letters, or just the idea of fraternity and sorority. Reach out to people. The ability to connect with others across the country and across the world is so much different than older folks like I ever experienced. There was no ability to instantly connect with all alumni across the country, across the world on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or any of those. Like, use those networks. And the other thing is, understand that for all of us, unless you are a rare exception, leaving the university and going out into the quote unquote real world. I don't even like that, because it's not as if the university is not the real world as well. Going out into the world is a scary time. It really, really is. But don't empty your backpack. Don't act as if all the things and all the lessons that you've learned at the university, you have to set down and never take with you. Your backpack is full now. Like, you have a whole lot of these things that you can take with you and equip you for the next step and the next step and the next. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I have one that we have here that you mentioned a couple of key points that, kind of closing your presentation. And one of the things that we talk about in all the different fraternities and sororities is those fraternal values, the values you take with us. Do you have any talk relative to that?
Sure, absolutely. While I know something about the values that my organization teaches, Mark's organization teaches, I don't know all of the lessons of your organizations, right? I don't know all your rituals, and I don't know all those things. But here's my hunch. My hunch is that at some point along the way, you've been taught to be there for your brother or your sister in the time of need, to when they're down, to help them up. Sometimes we refer to this as like being your brother's keeper, being your sister's keeper, looking out for them, especially when you see them about to step in a hole. Those values translate to every aspect of their life, of our lives. Being there for the people that we care about, doing our part, doing our share to ensure their success and their protection is very much rooted in sorority and fraternity. We learn these lessons here. We learn these different familial bonds. It's the reason that when I still see Mark Uridia, I say, hey, brother, we have zero blood relation, although we're devilishly handsome together, right? Like, we have zero blood relation, but Mark is my brother because we share this bond. And that bond transcends things. It transcends time and distance and geography and personal selfishness. We recognize the fact that we're committed to each other. And that means if he sees me veering off course, he's going to tap me on the shoulder. Likewise, it means if I see him about to step in a hole, I'm not going to pull out my phone and take a picture of it. I'm going to say, hey, man, watch out. There's a hole there. When we start internalizing those messages, we are better because of fraternity. I often say this in the work that I do. And by the way, again, I'm using the term fraternity to mean fraternity and sorority. If we do fraternity correctly, we answer a lot of society's problems. We really, really do. And if we do fraternity and sorority incorrectly, then we're perpetuating the worst of those problems. And a lot of times people will say to me like, well, the reason I'm doing X is because that's the way it's always been done in my organization, or that's the way I learned it. But we have an opportunity to always get better. We have an opportunity to say things are different than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago. We have an opportunity to say, one of the lessons that I always talk about is we have the opportunity now to carry the fire for our organizations. It's dimmer now than it probably has ever been in our histories. There are challenges, there's wind and rain and people trying to put it out. But those who come to our organizations now deserve to have the strongest support system possible, because they're responsible to carry that fire for those who've never even thought about fraternity and sorority. For the guy sitting in his high school class who's just trying to get through and barely making it and being told college isn't for everyone, the members right now are the ones protecting the fire so that when that person gets to the University of Toledo, they have the opportunity to have their life changed as well. That's what we can do. That's what we can do now, tomorrow, the next day, and every day after.
I have another question. As you know, and probably going right along with that, locally, there was a recent passing of a BPSU student. And with that, there's a typical sort of negativity or backlash that often seems to accompany those sort of incidents towards Greek organizations. What do you typically say when you're met with those sort of situations or that negativity towards Greek life, and how do you try to convey the benefits of Greek life in those situations?
Well, I think you've heard a lot of it tonight, but those stories are, they're real and they're far too frequent, and they're heartbreaking each and every time. Every time there's a death, that's someone's son. It's someone's daughter. I say son because vast majority are men. And that's a lot of the work that I do is with young men. There's no parent in this world, and now as a parent, I would say this, my daughter's not yet college age. There's no parent in the world who should send their child to college and not have them come home. If we're going to live up to our expectations, if we're going to still be relevant in 2021 and beyond, we have to recognize the fact that there are practices that are part of organizations that we need to stop. And we need to have people step forward and say, this is not who we are and this is not what we're about. And by the way, if this is what you're here for, we got to show you the door. Because everyone in an organization deserves to be safe. And no one should ever have to have a phone call with a parent. And I've had my share. I've talked to parents of young people across the country who've died in hazing incidents, and no one should ever have to feel the pain that they feel. So one of the things that I often say is that we need to recommit ourselves. None of our founders would be proud to see those headlines. None of our founders would say, this is what we're about. And if our founders said that we're about hazing, we want to hurt our newest members, we want to put them through mental and physical and emotional torture in order to become members, that's not an organization I want to be a part of. It's just contrary to I think what we should hope for in organizations that should be making us greater. Remember, I said be part of something greater than yourself. If it's not making you greater, then our relevance really is gone. But I also know that 99%, that's not the experience. It is a small percentage, and the goal is to get that percentage down to 0. And we need to do that each and every day. I feel like a lot of the questions tonight have been really deep, and I know that I went.
Well, I have a fun one, so we can pivot in a more positive direction. Now, you've shared a lot of UT memories, and they've been great, some good, some probably sad, but good in their own right. Yeah. What is your favorite UT memory? If you could go down memory road, things that maybe didn't make the cut of this presentation that now have a second chance. Wow. From your time at UT.
And not me. Don't bring me. Know that.
The first time I met Mark. No.
Sure.
It probably was related to fraternity, but it actually wasn't at the University of Toledo. It was the first time that I got to represent my chapter at something. The first one that I got to represent our chapter at was at a thing called Pi Cap College in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where our fraternity was founded. And I got to go to the place that the fraternity was founded, like 90 Broad Street. I was there. I got to meet our current chief executive officer, our past chief executive officer, two men who've shaped the last 60 years of our organization. I got to meet them during that trip. Now, I had this really amazing experience several years ago where the fraternity asked me to come and speak to new student leaders, right? It's a mid-year leadership event. And I'm standing there in Charlotte, North Carolina, and behind me is the flag of our fraternity. And it's probably 100 feet big, right? It's enormous. And I'm standing there and I look into the front row, and the last 60 years of leadership of our fraternity is sitting in the front row. And I thought to myself, how did I get here? And then I immediately thought to myself, I can't mess up. And those are probably the memories that I take with me that are the most meaningful. Also, I referenced the fact that I got to meet the person who wrote our new member education book. It's called The White Diamond. It's gone through some modifications since, but it's the first person to write it. His name's TJ Sullivan. And it was actually at another Pi Kappa Phi event where I was representing the university, where I met him for the first time. These are life-changing things. The first football game that I attended at the University of Toledo, we beat Purdue. Drew Brees, who just retired, he was the quarterback of Purdue. My first football game, and we beat him. I remember us beating Penn State. There was all these great memories. Just so many to encounter. But wow, painting the Spirit Rock and all those other kind of things, and just so many. I mean, I could be here for hours.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm sure most students have, like in your time, have a lot of great memories. Those were some special wins during that time for the UT football program.
Oh yeah. Way back in the 20th century.
Another question that has come
Sure.
in that I'll share. When you speak of the masculinity aspect of your presentation to other fraternities and sororities, how does the perception of your presentation when you start versus when you finish affect those that you're speaking to?
It's amazing. So it was probably 5-6 years ago that I started the work that takes up about 90% of my time now. And what I was seeing was that there was sort of a crisis in America where people were really concerned about young men. And I thought to myself, what is my opportunity and what is my responsibility to be a voice on this topic? And initially the response was, do men really need to have a conversation about these things? And I thought, yeah, I think so. So over the years, I've gotten to deliver it to thousands of people, and it's just profound each and every time. And the program always ends with a challenge. And when we do it in person, which is always the best, I often, will end it by saying, if you accept this challenge, come on up to the front. I have a token. I have a little token that I'll give you, and I shake their hand and I give them this token. And the lines of people and the stories that they tell, and I didn't know what I was coming here for, but I'm so glad that I did. Those just fuel me. I mean, on the long flights and the late nights and little sleep, and those things fuel me. But what fuels me even more, and I gotta say it's the coolest thing in the world, is when people come up to me 6 months later or a year later or 2 years later, they see me in an airport and they pull out their wallet and they pull out the token that I gave them that night when we shook hands and they accepted my challenge. That's the thing that gets me. That's the thing that I know that's moving the needle. It's the messages that I get from fathers and mothers who say, my son has never talked about X or Y or Z before, or I sought help for something that I thought I was never allowed to even talk about, or the friends that I've made over the years who are professionals in their career, who we have deep conversations about things that we're told as men we're not supposed to talk about. That's the impact, and that's the stuff that keeps fueling me. And that's one of the reasons why I got that vaccine today and want to get back out on the road and keep doing this work, because while this virtual stuff is good and big audiences and all that, it's awesome, it's great, there's something about being there face to face. there's something about being able to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye and tell them that you're rooting for them. I miss that, and I can't wait till it's back.
Yeah, and I remember you came to the University of Toledo to do that very subject, and
Sure
I have
did.
one of your coins, and it was cool to see the lines of guys. I think it was the University Interfraternity Council or fraternities, and maybe male athletics.
Yep.
But it was really, I would say, well done. And I think that line is what I picture too. And just the people, I was surprised how many people were lining up for that, but that was awesome. So
Humbling.
thank you for that as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, Casey, we are officially at 8 o'clock, and being mindful of everyone's time, I just have one final question.
Yeah.
I understand you have a special offer or maybe even a challenge to our attendees to end with. Do you mind sharing more about that?
Sure, Paul. So I said at the beginning that there are 3 paths you can take as a speaker. You can teach something, you can tell stories, which is the one that I took, or you can get people to take action. And I tried to teach something and tell stories tonight, and hopefully it was successful, and hopefully at least one of those stories landed for you. But now I want to encourage you to take action. So I'm going to share with you my commitment, and I hope you'll join me. Next week is going to be the Day of Giving at the University of Toledo. Paul's going to give you some information here in just a minute. It's going to be 36 hours of giving. And one of the last things that I said to you in this program was to give what and when you can. Well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, both literally and figuratively. 1997 was a very pivotal year for me. It was my first beginning of my relationship with the University of Toledo. So to commemorate that, I'm going to be donating $1,997 to the university. And in that, I'm going to be matching the first $1,997 of other donations. So, but here's what I'm giving to. I'm giving to a special fund called Rocket to Rocket. And it's specifically designed for those undergraduate students who are experiencing some financial hardships. These are the students who, maybe they're going to continue and maybe they're not. Maybe the difference between getting this grant or not getting this grant is whether or not they get to walk across that stage and move that tassel and tell their University of Toledo story. I'm committed as a Rocket to ensuring that all future Rockets and all current Rockets have the opportunity to be successful, and that if we can break down some of the barriers of financial hardships, that's my commitment. So please join me. If you would like to donate, I know that we're going live here soon. The page will probably go live tomorrow. Please use that QR code. Please reach out to me. You can call me, you can text me, you can email me, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, and I will be sharing the link. All you have to do is reach out to me and say, I'm in. I'll send you the link. And the first $1,997 donated, I'm matching it. That's my challenge to you. I hope you'll join me. Let's do some good stuff together, Rocket to Rocket, and make sure our future Rockets are prepared to be successful as well.
Thank you, Casey. It's always humbling to have alumni like you that are willing to give back. For those of you you may have noticed, I did share a link in the chat. That is to the general Alumni Association Day of Giving page. You click Give Now, it'll bring up a list of funds. Scroll down to Rocket, that's where it's at. Also, I'll send out an email to everyone probably tomorrow with the additional information on that as well, some special links and things for that.
Make me spend my money. Folks, look, whether you're watching this live, you're watching it in the future, you're watching it tomorrow, you're watching it a week from now, make me spend my money. Paul's going to hold me accountable to this. Make me spend at least $1,997, Rocket to Rocket.
Thank you, Casey. So as we close, I'd once again like to thank our guest, Casey Cornelius, for sharing his story, his insights, his, of course, passion for helping others, as well as the University of Toledo. Casey, your commitment and, of course, affinity for the University of Toledo is great. And honestly, we're humbled and very grateful to be able to count you as being among our alumni. So thank you for that. As Casey mentioned in his challenge, the Day of Giving is next week on April 7th and 8th. It's 2 days. It spans over, it's a one day, but it spans over 2 days. And that's our UToledo Day of Giving. It's a 36-hour event that supports various student-centered funds and initiatives around the university. I invite you to click the link and go and return to the UT Foundation page, return to the University of Toledo Day of Giving page. You will see several different funds from around campus that you can give to, several different pages you can go to and scroll through funds. It's really kind of a neat way to give back to the university and give to a lot of different things that you may be passionate about. As I said, I will share the link to Casey's information specifically, so those of you that want to take part in that challenge can do so. I also want to thank Mark Urrutia, my co-host for this evening, for helping put this event together, for everything that he does to help the Greek alumni community, especially the Greek alumni affiliate that he serves as president of. A special reminder that events such as this are made possible due to the purchasing of Alumni Association memberships by UToledo Greek alumni. If you'd like to join the Alumni Association and purchase or renew your membership, just visit toledoalumni.org. For those of you that are students, all graduates receive a free complimentary 5-year membership to the UToledo Alumni Association. We do have various alumni groups throughout the country and also locally. So if you're interested in getting involved, we'd love to see you at an alumni event sometime soon. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of you, the audience, for this evening's program. We're grateful for your support and your presence. With that, we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great week. Go Rockets.
Thanks, everybody. Go Rockets.